Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
So Jean, what did you see specifically in the music of Katie that made you think of dance?
I saw the Canadian prairies. I saw the landscapes of Western Canada. I saw the people of the prairies, and I saw many intense love songs and songs about what makes us human in this world today. And so the story started to develop based on the music and the lyrics. And I also believe that the landscapes inspired, probably how she sings and how she sees art and life. Those prairies were something when I moved there 12 years ago. I felt like I was moving into an empty place from Montreal. It was another psychological kind of place to live in. But after 12 years there now, I see that, they're rich in everything, the prairies spiritually, and there's something about them that are comforting. And so after 12 years of living in that landscape, I thought when I was listening to Katie's music, there was something that was connecting in so many
You could hear
levels.
the landscape.
Yes, and I could feel how they might have inspired her and in her life. So it was a connection that was very strong right away.
And the story of this ballet is a pure love story.
It's a love story because really it's the journey of a woman who grows up in a small town in Alberta, who falls in love, moves to the big city, and then returns to the prairies to find her anchor again, to find her identity and to find true love. So it's not really the life of Katie Lang because, it's really, we try to create portraits on their music. It's very different than their lives. But it is inspired by some events in their lives because that inspired their music as well.
It's not a straight up biography, but as you said in the film, you're interpreting through this abstract art form her ethos.
Yes, it's a narrative ballet, sometimes abstract, but mostly a narrative work, this one, yeah.
And Katie, how do you see the ballet story?
Interesting. I love the story and the thread that Jean created through years of my music. It's interesting. I was a bit skeptical at first. But he created something so incredibly moving, just combining the beauty of the human body with the landscape and unfortunately my music. But it's so beautiful to watch. It's so interesting to see someone else interpret your work and other, not just one person, but other people interpret your work. And you can just see it in a completely different light.
What was your initial skepticism that you mentioned?
I just think when, it's just, my music is so emotional and so much a part of me and my history, my personal journey, that having it sort of taken out of the context of my own understanding of what that is and put it into public in a different art form. I was worried it was going to be cheesy. I was worried that it was. I'm not sure. I think probably cheesy or kitsch or I had no experience with ballet previous to Balletlujah. Now I'm a huge fan of the Alberta Ballet and what Jean does.
And she comes to all her shows now. Classical ballets, contemporary works. Yeah,
I
it's
do.
nice to have her there.
And Jean, you've talked about in working on this project, trying to keep up with the power and the magnificence of her voice.
Yes.
How inspiring was that of a challenge for you on this particular project?
Well, we rehearsed the ballet for almost 6 months before the premiere, on and off. But it's, we all often work with classical composers in ballet. So it was interesting because every time we worked with Katie's music, no matter how tired the dancers were, something happened in the room. That voice carries, it's like a symphonic power almost. And so we just were lifted by it. We never felt as energized as we did when we were working with her music. So there's something about it that not only dynamically but emotionally, touches you very deeply.
And Katie, you were converted from your skepticism. What was it like when you first saw the ballet?
I was very nervous, but as I sat there and watched the show in its entirety, I was extremely moved by the provocative insight that Jean had into the music and the stories, how he translated each individual song and what that meant to him and what that meant in terms of being interpreted into dance. I love the story that he constructed. Even as we said, it's not necessarily a biography, but it's it's this beautiful creation built on years and years of my work, and it has a beautiful flow to it, and I actually felt a great sense of pride in terms of the diversity of the music, which I guess you kind of become desensitized to your work and you don't have any objectivity. So I walked away just feeling completely proud and astonished by all the work that went into it by the dancers and by Jean. The sets are incredible, and just feeling completely honored that other artists would commit that much work to something that was rooted in my music.
There's a moment in the documentary where you said you trust him, and you said that with a lot of confidence. What was that moment for you where you said, I trust this guy creatively?
After the dress rehearsal?
Probably after the dress rehearsal, yeah. After I started to see it and to see how much integrity there was in the show, because he really came out of nowhere. I was living in L.A. He came down to L.A. and pitched us this ballet, and I really, unfortunately, my connection to the Alberta Ballet was pretty well nil at that point, and so it really came out of nowhere. And then when he pitched it, and after the first rehearsal, like I said, I realized how much
you saw the integrity.
Yeah,
in it and
I saw the depth in it. Yeah.
There's a moment in the documentary where you turn to Jean. You say, "If there's any controversy, you hope he's the one who gets the flack because you're tired of it."
I'm tired of it.
You were sort of joking in that moment, but were you also not joking?
Well, I think I have some. I have some sort of scars or some wounds from growing up in Alberta. The meat controversy, which is old news now, but it definitely shaped me and my opinion of Alberta. Plus, coming out in '92 when I did, that's a lot different than 2015, and I didn't know what to expect, but now in the documentary Balletlujah, it's a love story, and it's really represented by two women, but it's so incredibly more vast than that now, and people's understanding of what that is and what gender represents and what love is so much more developed now.
Times have certainly changed, but at the same time, I think it was you that said this might be the first ballet that you know of with a gay love story.
Well, between two women, yes, because I know modern dance has probably done it already. Contemporary ballet, it hasn't. I can't remember hearing about a full-length ballet anywhere where the two main protagonists, the lovers, are two women. And so that was very special because somehow, when I talked to KD, when we did our early interviews, and I said, was it difficult to be gay in a small town in Alberta? And your answer was interesting because you said it got difficult when I moved to the big city, because that's when I realized people were really judging this. In the small town, people were a bit more accepting, and that gave me an idea to make the love story. It's not about being gay, it's about being in love, and it just happens to be two women. And I think that's what's interesting about the ballet, is that we're not tackling the theme of homosexuality, but the theme of love. And it just happens to be two women, so people were very accepting of the ballet when it first premiered that way.
You two share a real artist-to-artist intimacy in the film. I asked Katie a little bit about her trust of you.
Yeah.
What was it like for you, that artist-to-artist intimacy?
Can you imagine how privileged I am as a ballet choreographer to be working with Katie Lang, and the fact that we can talk about her life and her music. Most composers we work with in ballet are from the 18th century, 19th century. So it's interesting to be able to talk to the musician and the composer and the interpreter about what the music means, and so in that way it was interesting because it opens doors, and it's a bit of a portrait we're creating on their music, and so we need that intimacy, that conversation, to be able to envision a ballet that would be truthful, to their music. And that it touches me very much when you say you're proud, because that's the most important for all of us, the designers and the dancers, that we did something that you found represented your music well. And all the time we worked 2 years on the production, so in the end that's our best applause is from the composer themselves or the singer-songwriter, if they tell us that they're happy with the ballet.
Katie, you talked about how it's hard to have objectivity about your own catalog. at a certain point. Did you learn anything new about yourself or your music through this process?
I think probably the thing that was illuminated was that my eclectic nature is actually represented in the ballet. Like, I think of myself as just doing my music, but my music has actually touched on a lot of different genres, and I think that was represented.
You can kind of be blind to that eclecticism at a certain point.
Yeah, and it's either been good or very bad for my career. Probably a little bit of both, because it's not easy to market an artist that jumps around categories so much, but it's kept me interested in music, and it made for an interesting ballet.
And Jean, what did you learn from this particular collaboration?
Well, she was a terrific muse, very generous and very caring for us and what we were doing. And, it's amazing how eclectic her catalog is when you start really looking at everything and how brilliant the interpretations are, whether it's country or jazz. She's a bit of a Stanley Kubrick of music where, you touch every genre and everything's brilliant, as if though she can adapt her voice and to all styles of music. And so in that way, working with her was so invigorating for all of us and challenging, because we had to try to, you can't capture the entire singer in 2 hours, or that's impossible, but you can try to capture the essence of the singer. And that collaboration brought me to a new place as a choreographer. And they're some of the best moments of my life in my career. They're so inspiring that all the sacrifices you make to work in the world of arts become worthwhile after a collaboration like that.
Is it intimidating, that initial reaching out? As Katie was saying, she was just living her life in LA, and you have to convince her to embark on this journey.
Well, the first time I saw Katie was at the opening ceremonies, because I was director of choreography in Vancouver for the Olympics.
For the Olympic opening ceremonies.
And Katie came in and the night of the ceremonies and just blew it away live. She sang live in a stadium. Not many people agree to do that. And, I think she was the highlight of the whole opening ceremonies. It was really the moment where the whole world went, wow, and many friends from around the world told me they wanted to move to Canada after seeing that. And so after that ceremony, I said, wow, this is one of the great talents of the century in voice. And I hope she will agree to support us in Alberta to create a ballet, in her home province, inspired by her music and what inspired her to make that music. So in the end, it was intimidating the first time we met in Los Angeles. And I remember you had been meditating all night because it was the Buddhist New Year the day before. So you hadn't slept all night. And but you looked like you had like 100 massages.
You caught me at a good moment then.
Yes.
I was all zenned out.
So it was a good timing.
I wouldn't have said yes otherwise.
Yes. I have to remember when the Buddhist New Year is.
Katie, in this film, you reflect on what the prairies have meant to you. What's your relationship like with that land now?
I would say it's healing at this point, but it's been mixed over the years. It's a beautiful place. I'm very, very happy I grew up there. It's allowed me, I always think of it as this blank canvas that's just complete fodder for imagination, because where I grew up, there wasn't much going on physically or culturally. Mm-hmm. Unless you played hockey, and I didn't. So it gave me a lot of room to develop my imagination and who I wanted to be. But then, like I said, I mentioned a couple incidences where it was a difficult journey, and I was really excited to move on and go to a bigger city, a more urban, cultural surrounding, and now, similar to Balletlujah, I find myself back there, and it is healing.
You called it healing, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty healing, and I see Canada in a completely different light. I have to say that being away from it, being away from the prairies, being away from Alberta and Canada, and having a removed view of what this culture is and how it's changed since I've left for the last 30 years or so. Mm-hmm. It's an incredible thing to sort of re-immerse myself back into the culture and back into the world that I grew up in, which is similar and very, very different than what I experienced.
What is it exactly that you find healing about it? Is it just that that's your roots and your history, or is there something else that you find healing about that land?
Well, I think, any sort of emotional discord that you sort of carry around in you isn't healthy. So even having sort of dissonant memories of Canada or Alberta probably isn't healthy for me, and my views of the rest of the world being tainted through those lenses. But I just think, just understanding that this country and Alberta is who I am, essentially. My DNA is Canadian prairie. And to be able to settle back down into what it is and how it affects me. And as Jean was saying, the landscape has really informed who I am as a singer and even as a painter, the minimalism in which I approach life in general. So it feels good to make friends with that again.
And Jean, you went through the work of filming her hometown, right?
Yeah, well, in the scenery design, we knew we were going to try to somehow poetically recreate the Canadian prairies. It's not an easy task on a stage, so I had some really wonderful designers. One of them, a video artist, Adam Larson, who drove around the province for a week with his camera filming stunning images. And he went to Concert, Alberta, where Katie grew up. I think a population of 300, maybe.
650. Come on.
Even when you were younger, this wasn't.
No, it's been around 600, 650. I think it still is.
Yeah.
Yeah, forever.
Well, that's a very small town.
It's a pretty small town.
And we filmed a lot of the iconic places of Concert. And your mom was sitting with you that night of the premiere. And she was remembering that barn and that church and that tree, because it was interesting. You mentioned there's so few objects in the prairies that every one of them has a lot of purpose.
Significance. Yeah, a tree has a huge significance.
Yeah, you remember every tree and every barn,
pretty
and the
much,
history of everything. So there's a connectivity there that's so strong, and we had to capture that in the ballet. And so the visuals were a big part of the whole creation, and that's why I feel the Canadian prairies protect me now. I feel like you're isolated with this distance and around you that seems to be a place of recollection and introspection anyway.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
And that's afforded, I'd imagine, by the space.
Yes.
And space has always been important to you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
Well, I think just because that's where I grew up. It also sort of correlates with, I guess, my Buddhist philosophy, emptiness and space and having, like Jean said, just having the actual physical space and time to be introspective and live more introspectively. There's the stimulation really comes from inside. So, yeah, it's funny. It does definitely lend itself to having to create an entire world internally.
Do you have a greater desire for space now, or has that stayed pretty much consistent? Or do you need less space now?
I have to say that I have learned that space is your mind. Your mind is, that the physical realms of where we park ourselves isn't as important as where we park our minds.
Now, Katie, your music can be so expressive, vocally and musically. At the same time, you're quite private as a person. How do you divide those two? How are you able to be so expressive musically and at the same time personally so private? Has that ever been a challenge?
I guess maintaining a stillness allows me to be more of a voyeur and more of a observer of both myself and of life, and to be able to have the compassion and empathy for others in a more observational or like removed sense, rather than let my emotions drive me on a day-to-day basis. But to be more removed and quiet and observe things that are going on allows me to have a broader understanding of what others go through.
And more power creatively, expressively.
Well, I think the power comes from the understanding of what others might go through. Yeah.
And then Jean comes along and tells this racy love story to capture your ethos.
Oh, well, it makes me look good. I'd like to think that my life is that racy and interesting and sexy, but
In 2 hours flat.
in 2 hours.
One thing I want to say, I even think the prairies help you shape your voice, your technique of singing and how you project. And you said to me you used to go to open spaces and
I used to go down to the hockey rink in the summer and the curling rink when they were empty, and it was just a big concrete box, and the reverb in there was fantastic, the acoustics.
So learning how these spaces interact with your voice.
Yeah, actually, I did practice a lot down in there.
And I'd imagine singing outside in those wide open spaces, very challenging as far as projection goes too. So
Yeah, well, it gave me lots of space to get my volume and my projection up, for sure.
it's like the birds near the ocean sing differently than the birds in the cities. It's a completely different way of singing. And
Really? Is that true?
Yeah, listen
Why?
to
Did
the
you
seagulls.
observe that, or you know that for sure?
Well, when you go near an ocean and an open space, the way the birds sing, it's like a long, sustained note that goes far, like they're
Oh,
trying
yeah,
to reach
that is
someone
true, yeah.
in the distance. And I felt when I used to drive up to Red Deer from Calgary or Edmonton, I'd play your music, especially when I was creating the ballet, really loud with my windows down in the car, and they just melted into the prairies, the songs. You know, it was like the same energy. It was something really beautiful to see. Yeah.
Katie, what did you learn by watching this play that's about love and desire representing your art? How did you feel about that? Those themes kind of representing your catalog.
Well, love and desire seems to be the theme that I focus on almost entirely. I think that I'm very intrigued by desire and human desire and how that expresses itself. And generally, it expresses itself in love. But it's not even just human desire. It's just this, like the desire of existence. Both, you know, it can be an animal or what have you. But just the experience of this existence and how much desire plays a part of that.
Has always been a theme in your music, you think?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's very. Until I find the answer, I'll probably keep writing about it.
And Jean, what did you learn about love from Katie's catalog?
I think that, you know, there's so many love songs. There's so many different ones. There's some in the jazz. There's some in the country. All of them. Some of them are joyous and celebrating. Others are very, very painful. Ain't It Funny, for example, which is almost near the end of the ballet. And there's something about loyalty that came out of many of the songs, the theme of love and loyalty and being really dedicated to someone in so many different ways. And so the betrayal became a big moment in the ballet where love is given in loyalty, but she's betrayed and is left alone in this big urban environment to find herself again. And that's when she goes back to the prairies to anchor herself. But in this throwaway world we live in now, where everything is so one day, 2 day, and the amnesia that seems to be prevalent everywhere, there was something about connectivity and long-lasting and a gift from someone to someone that would be something for a lifetime, and the importance of that. Was a big inspiration for me in working with her music.
Do you see that as a big part of the love theme that runs through all your music, that idea of commitment and loyalty and unconditional nature of love?
I don't know how to answer that because, you know, I think every time I write or every time I sing, maybe the motivation or the experience of singing that song is different for me. So, you know, maybe sometimes I feel ultimately committed or ultimately loyal, or sometimes I feel I'm singing from a place of just having a broken relationship. So, and I'm not always singing from my point of view. I'm singing from the story's point of view. So it is always changing. I think to dip down into the understanding of all of those things is the treasure of which I borrow. I don't think that it's necessarily something I own, but it's something I sort of swim in.
Before we wrap, the idea of home is so important in this story. Katie, your home now is Portland.
Yeah.
Why Portland?
It's a great city.
It is a great city.
It's the most Canadian city of all American cities. Yeah, Well, I kind of live in Portland and Calgary now.
And how are you helping keeping Portland weird? What's your contribution to that?
Let's see.
You were on that television show.
I was on Portlandia, yeah. Let's see. How do I keep Portland weird? Maybe by my absence at this point. You know, it's pretty easy to keep Portland weird. It's any city that allows the individuals to really flourish, which Portland does, is a good city, I think.
And just to throw a bone to our Canadian audiences, what is it about the prairies that can't be replaced?
It's the mindset of space. It's the mindset of openness, and yet, like Jean said, there's a moat of safety because you're so far from everything that you have to. It feels like you're far from everything, that you have to be comfortable with creating your own world, I think.
You got to be comfortable with your own internal world.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is a great gift. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.